Hello everyone, welcome back to today's video. Today we are going to be continuing on our MongoDB setup. We are going to be doing part 2 today, where we're going to create our player data class and actually save data. I apologize if you hear my dog or anything in the background. She's quite excited today. So let's just go ahead and get straight into this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a instance in our main class. What this is it's going to let us reference our main class from other classes. In this case, we're going to create 2 other classes, so we're going to need this. So at the top of your class, I'm just going to use Loonbach, which is a add-on. If you don't have it and you go ahead and do @getter and it doesn't say, oh, it's a red line, just import this. Then below it, we're just going to do public static, and we're just going to do the name of the class, which is Mongo, and we're just going to call it instance. This will allow us to grab it from another class. Then in our onEnable, all we have to do is instance equals this, and now we can go ahead and grab this from another class. Now, we're going to create our other classes. We're going to need 2 classes for what we're doing today. We're going to need a player data class, and we're going to need a stat class. We're going to go ahead and create the player data class, but we're not going to put anything into it yet. We're just going to keep it here, and the only thing we're going to do is add that getter to the top of that class as well. And if you're just going to have the red line, once again, press Alt-Enter and make sure you're inputting from Loonbach, just like that. All right, so now that we have that, we're actually going to create another class and name it stat. The reason we're going to name it stat is because this is where we're actually going to store all of our stats and actually grab them, because these are stats with amounts, not strings. So we're just going to use one class for all of them, which comes in very handy when you're actually doing these types of things. So we're going to do private integer, and we're just going to name it amount. What we're going to do is we're going to add the options for this private integer. We're going to have increase, set, decrease, and get. So public void increase amount, and then we're just going to call that amount integer amount. And what we're going to do is inside of these brackets, we're going to do this dot amount equals this dot amount plus amount. So if you don't know what this is doing, we have the current amount, and the new amount will equal the current amount plus any new amount. So this is when we're increasing. You can literally just copy this, and you're going to probably guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to decrease amount, and we're just going to switch this plus sign to a minus sign. Pretty easy, just like that. And then we're actually going to do a public integer, which is going to return the get amount method. So this is how many current amount we have. So we're going to return this dot amount. So obviously, if you have 0 amount or something, that will return 0. And then the final thing we're going to do is set amount. So this will be actually a void set amount integer amount. And then inside of the set amount method, we're just going to do this dot amount equals amount. Just like that. So what we're doing is we are setting the amount to whatever we call the amount as, and the decrease amount is getting the current amount, subtracting it, and then the increase amount is getting our current amount, adding whatever else to that as well. So very, very easy to set up and use. Now we can actually call this in our profile data method. So we're going to go back to our profile data class, and there's a few things we're going to have to add in here. The first thing I'm going to add is a call to our main class. So I'm going to do private, and then I'm going to call the main class. This is Mongo, and I'm just going to call it plugin to keep it easy for us. And I'm going to do mongo.getInstance. And then you can see that's not going to error anymore. We're just going to keep that up at the top of our class because we can now call plugin rather than doing mongo.getInstance for every single time we need to do that. It's not going to be much in this video, but we will have to call it a few times. Alright, so now we can actually create the few things we're going to need. The ones that are going to be in every single one for our stats is going to be storing their UUID. So we're going to private UUID and just call it UUID. And we're also going to call private string and then the player name. So we're just going to call whatever the player name is because that will be the user. If it's asking you to import, just import the Java UUID. It's fine. You don't have to worry much about that. So now we're actually going to call the profile data class itself. So public profile data. And what we're going to do in here is we're just going to do UUID is UUID, and the string of the player name is actually the player name, just like that. And then in here, we're going to do this dot UUID, and that's going to be equal to UUID. And then we're going to do this dot player name. I can't spell it correctly. Player name is equal to name. Just like that. You can see it is error. Jumping ahead just real quick, I accidentally named it profile data. It's supposed to be player data, so just go ahead and save it as player data. The error will disappear. Alright, so now we're going to add our reset data and our actual data we're going to be saving. So what we're going to do is at the top of our class, we're going to do private, and then we're going to call the stat because we're creating a new stat. And this stat is going to be blocks mined because that's what we're going to store here. And what we're going to do is just do blocked mine equals new stat. Just like that. Now we have our private stat. Now we can actually go ahead and save this data, and then we're going to go ahead and create our profiles, which will get rid of that profile data error as well. So we're going to create a few methods for this. We're going to do public void, and we're just going to call this reset data. So if you ever need to reset the player's data, you're going to have a method to do this, and then you're just going to do this dot blocks mined dot set amount. And then you're just going to set the amount to 0, because when you reset it, obviously you're just going to reset it to 0. And make sure you're not doing gets blocks mined. Make sure you're just doing this dot blocks mined, just because it's in the same class. You don't need to use the get method, just like that. Next thing we're going to need is actually going to load up the data. So we're going to do public void load. And then this is going to be where we're actually going to type out our loading method to get all of the documents from the MongoDB. So we're just going to do document, which is imported from when we did the MongoDB, and then it's just going to be called as document. You're importing document, make sure you're importing the correct document. When you press import, just make sure you're the org.bson, which is from the MongoDB Java driver. So just make sure you're importing that. Then we're actually going to do the plugin because that's our main class, and you can see we put our Mongo manager in our main class. Normally you would have it in a separate class or something, but in this case it is in our main class. And you can see we don't actually have a getter or anything on here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a getter at the top of our main class here to allow us to grab the server collection and the database names and everything from another class. So what we're going to do is plugin dot get server collection, because that is going to be the name of our server collection, and we're going to do dot find, and then in here we're going to do filters dot eq, and then inside of the eq what we're going to do is we're going to add and search for the UUID, because we're going to be storing the player data based on their UUID. And then what we're going to do is just put comma get UUID to string, just like that. That's all we have to do. And make sure also, forgot this, add dot first to the end of there as well. And then if you just start erroring, just add the parentheses and everything that I've just forgot to add there, and you can see it's no longer erroring. So what we're doing is we are loading the document. We're going to check for the document in a moment from the server collection, which is in our main Mongo class, looking for the UUID whenever we load the data. And then we're just obviously going to run a check if the document is null. So if document is not null, make sure you add the equal sign as well. If the document is not null, this is where we're going to load the data. So we're going to do this dot, and then whatever the name of the data we're actually going to be saving. In this case, it is our blocked mine. So this dot blocks mined, and then we're just going to go ahead and set the amount to whatever the document's going to be. So it's going to be document.getInteger, and we're going to name this whatever key we want to name it. In this case, I'm just going to name it blocks mined, just like that. There we go. We have saved and loaded that data. And obviously, we're going to save your UUID and everything in a different method. So this method is just for loading the data that already exists. Now it's time to save all of the data. So we're going to do public void once again. And this is just going to be called save. You can pretty much name this what you want. You're just going to call it whenever you save data. And this is once again going to use the document from Bson. And it's going to be another document. And this is going to be a new document. So what this is doing is if it doesn't already exist, it's going to save and create this document. There's a few things we're going to save here. We're going to save the name of the player, the real name with caps, and the UUID along with our custom saved data. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to do document.put, and what this is going to do is we're going to put a key for this document. In this case, the first one we're going to do is name, and then we're going to get player name, just like this, get player name dot to lowercase. So what this is going to do is it's just going to go ahead and pull the player's name in lowercase when we're saving the data, and then we're just going to do once again another put. This case it's going to be real name, so we're just going to put real name. And what this is going to do is the exact same thing, just to get player name method, not the to lowercase, so that's their real name. And then we're just going to store also their UUID, so exact same thing we just did, name it UUID, and then we're just going to go ahead and get the UUID to string, and we're just going to save that as well. Now we can actually save the data under the same key we saved up here. So we're going to do document put, and then we're going to do, in this case, blocks mined, because that's the name we did, and we're just going to do get blocks mined. just like this. And it's just going to be, and then we're just going to put, so we're going to do blocks mind, and then this dot get, this dot blocks mind dot get amount, just like that. So now we can go ahead and get the documents for how many blocks were mined. There we go. That's all you have to do here. Now we actually have to save the data. So we're going to kind of do the exact same thing we did up here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the first part of our load document here, put this down at the bottom, but this time it's just going to go, you can get rid of the document. It's just going to be plugin.getServerCollection, or whatever we named it in the last video, replace one, and then it's going to be a filter once again, so filters.eq. And then in here, you're just going to go ahead and take the UUID2 string. So just like this, we're just going to throw this in the same place we did previously, just like that. But then we're going to go ahead and do a comma, and then it's going to be document, just like that. And then we're just going to go ahead and update the fields. So we're going to do document, comma, new update options, just like that. It's going to ask you to import it. That's fine. Dot up, cert, and then we're just going to do true. Just like that. And then we can close that line off with the ending bracket. There we go. And we are good to go. We have now saved, loaded, and reset our player data methods in here. Now the final thing we actually have to go ahead and set up is actually going to call and create the profiles. And this has to be done by creating a player profile. So that's what we're going to do now. Going to go ahead and create another class, and we're going to name this profile, and this is how we're actually going to give the data to the player. In this class, we're going to do a getter at the top and a setter. So what this does is it will add the set and get methods for this, and make sure you're just importing the Loombach one for both of them as well, just to make it really easy, because Java also has some called the same and it gets confusing. We're going to do once again the same thing we did previously. Private Mongo equals the same plugin, or private Mongo plugin equals mongo.getInstance, so we don't have to recall that every time. We're then going to specify the player data class, so private player data just equals data, or whatever we want to do, right, like that. And we're going to get their UUID2, UUID is their UUID, just like that. And then we're going to call, the final thing we're actually going to call is the creating the profile method, just like we did in the last time. So we're going to go ahead and do public profile. So this is going to be calling for this class, and we're going to do UUID, and we're going to do string, and then the name. We got to specify that name actually at the top of the class as well. Also have to go ahead and specify the player name. So at the top, we're going to do private string, and then we're just going to name player name, just so we can specify that. In our profile class, then we can do this dot UUID equals UUID, this dot player name equals name, just like that. And then this dot data equals new profile data. So we're actually going to call that method now, and we're going to call it with UUID and name. All right, so remember I renamed at the beginning, so just rename this to player data, make sure it's the same as the class name. I just messed up. I was reading off my guide and I named the classes differently. Still not working, because I have to actually capitalize the UUID up here, and then you can see there's no errors anymore. That was my mistake. I came back a second ago and I was like, this is so broken. This is the problem. So this is where we're going to go ahead and leave this class. We're not going to do anything else in this class. The reason for this is we actually have to go create a manager which creates these profiles now. So we're going to create a new class. We're going to name it Profile Manager. And inside this Profile Manager, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and set it up so we can call all of the profiles from the creating of them in the player join event, which we'll create later on, into the Profile Manager. To save time and this video not be super long, I'm going to include the code for this class by default in GitHub, so you can just pull the code for the Profile Manager class so you don't have to type it all out. Alright, so I've gone ahead and pasted in everything, and you can see the only error I'm getting when I pasted in all this code is extends manager, because we didn't actually create a manager's class. So that's what we're going to do finally here. I'm going to do create a new class, and we're just going to name it manager. And the reason we're going to name it manager is because it's going to be an all args constructor. And what this means is what we're going to do is we're going to add a getter, and we're just going to go ahead and say protected, and then all we're going to call is the main class. So main class is Mongo, and it's called plugin. Just go ahead and input these just like you normally would, all back through Loombox. And then if we go back to Profile Manager, you can see it's no longer erroring. So we know we have done that successfully and set that up successfully, which is great. Now we're going to call this in our main class and set up our methods. So we're at the top, we're just going to do private and call the Profile Manager because that's going to be our manager, and we're just going to call it Profile Manager just like that. Keep it really, really easy. So what we're going to do is make sure you're enabling the Profile Manager after you connect to Mongo, because obviously if you register it before you connect to Mongo, you're going to run into problems with things not loading correctly because you don't want to create the profile before you load their like player data or any of that. So make sure you're loading this after you load the profile data and MongoDB. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do player manager, because that's the name of the class, equals new player manager, because that's the name of the class once again, and the plugin is this. So we're just going to go ahead and import that. Make sure you are spelling the classes correctly. I've done that a lot today. And then same thing here, profile manager. Make sure you're just calling it correctly. There we go. So profile manager equals new profile manager. We've now registered that class, and we are good to go on that. But now you may be wondering, what in the world, how do I actually call this? What do I do to set up and handle the profile creation and loading of all the data? Well, I'll show you. We're going to go ahead and make our main plugin just implement listener, so we can set this up in our main class. Obviously, you would want to do this in another class, but it's completely up to you on where you set all this up. So we're going to go ahead and register the events in this class as well. So we're just going to do plugin get server, and then we're just going to do get plugin manager, just like that. Very easy. And then register events, and then we're just going to call this just to register our main event class here. And then we're just going to go ahead down here and call our player join event. So event handler, public void, we're just going to name it on join or something, player join event, just like that. We're going to call event. Then we're going to go ahead and import the event handler, obviously, and we're just going to go ahead and handle the creation of their profile. So we're going to do player equals event.getPlayer, so we can just grab the player easily here. Make sure to import player, it's org.bucket.player, and then in here we're just going to do get profile manager, because we're in the main class. We can just do get profile manager dot handle profile creation, and this is where you're going to get their UID, so player dot get unique ID. And then you're also going to get their name, player.getName. And what this is doing is it's calling the same method in here. So it's creating a new profile with their UID and their name, just like that. So that's quite easy to do. And you're just going to go ahead and next load their profile. So in order to get their profile, now that you created it, you're going to go ahead and do profile and then profile equals. And if you're not in your main class, you would just do get profile manager or something. But in this case, we're just going to do get profile manager dot get profile, and then the player name. So get profile, make sure you're doing just get profile, not get profiles. The player dot get unique ID. So we're just going to go ahead and grab that unique ID, and then that's going to be our profile. And then you're just going to do profile dot get data dot load. And you're just going to go ahead and load that data. So let's go over what we just did. We are creating their new handle profile creation when they join the server. If they have a profile already, what this does is it's going to go ahead and get the profile, which is great. If you do have one, or if it creates one for you, we're going to go ahead and get it after it's created. And then we're going to use this load method and load the blocks mined based off the UID. If it doesn't have the blocks mined, it's going to create a new profile with all this data. The save data we'll go over in a second. We're just going to make another event. So now that we have loaded their profile and everything, I'm just going to do a bucket dot get, we'll do broadcast message just to make it a little bit easy. Broadcast message, and it's just going to say loaded player, loaded, I'll do plus the player name. So loaded player dot get name plus data, loaded player's data, something like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a new event handler, and this is going to be on our on block break event. So public void on block break, and then we're just going to do block break event, just like that, event. And then we're just going to call the player name. So player equals event dot get player, just like we've done above. and obviously you can get the player through different methods and everything. And then you're going to do the same thing. You can literally just copy this profile.profile manager. We now have the profile. This is where it's going to be a little different. We're just going to do profile.getData, and then inside of the getData method, you can see where you're going to have the option to .get blocks mined. So we're going to get the blocks mined, and then we're going to increase amount by 1 every time they break a block. And then obviously, if you were doing this in a production ready environment, you should probably cache the data rather than saving it right away. But since we're not going to be doing that, we're just going to be on a test server. I'm not going to cache the data. I'm just going to do .getData.save, just like that, and we have saved the data. And we're going to go ahead and broadcast another message, and it's going to be saved player data. And then we can go ahead and check the database to make sure it has saved the data correctly. We're done. That's all we have to do. We have successfully created our MongoDB saving and database. Let's go ahead and load into the server and make sure it's working properly. All right, so one thing I noticed in the previous video's comments is everybody was kind of having problems with MongoDB not shading in. So when you go ahead and go to your artifacts page, go ahead and press the plus button, go to jar, and make sure you're clicking from modules with dependencies. Go ahead and click OK, and you can see it automatically shades in Loombox, MongoDB. That means you're ready to go. So just make sure it's shading it in correctly, because if it's not, it won't actually work, and it will just error a bunch. So make sure those two are selected. Go ahead and build your artifacts, rebuild them, whatever you're doing, and we can go ahead and test it on our server. All right, so loading up our server, you can see it is successfully connected to MongoDB, just like the last time we did the video, which means we are ready to join and test out if it works. So we're just going to join our local host server, and as we join, we should get the message in chat that says loaded noodles data. Yay, it worked properly. And if we break a block, it should say saved, which means it is running and saving the data correctly. In the next video, I'll show you how you can pull the data from the database and actually make commands with it, so you can reset it, set it, and check amounts and everything. But this was just a simple tutorial to do it. Hopefully this did help you out a lot. All the code's down on GitHub. I do apologize if I misspelled anything during the video. I am very, very tired, and it's been a very long week. So thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. I'll be back in 2 days for the next video. Hopefully this did help you. I do apologize for the long delay in getting this out. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.